Welcome to the official channel of Sheikh Hamdan, where we delve into the captivating world of the royal family. Join us as we share exclusive insights and updates on the intriguing dynamics of this esteemed family. As the grand wedding hall shimmered beneath the warm, golden glow of soft lighting, the atmosphere was electric. The sweet fragrance of freshly arranged roses wafted through the air, mingling with the soft hum of anticipation and the melodic strains of a lone violin. Guests mingled, their laughter and hushed whispers blending in perfect harmony. Yet, behind the closed doors of the bridal suite, a different scene unfolded. The bride stood poised, her reflection staring back from the mirror's glassy surface. Her breathing was ragged, her heart racing with a mix of emotions. The exquisite white gown hugged her slender frame, a breathtaking vision of elegance and poise. Delicate lace cascaded down her back, a whisper of silk and promise. But despite the fairy tale perfection of the moment, the bride's shoulders felt the weight of expectation, the crushing pressure of a dream she'd nurtured since childhood. This was the day she'd waited for, the day she'd imagined, rehearsed, and perfected in her mind's eye. And now, as the clock ticked closer to the ceremony, she stood frozen, her heart suspended between doubt and destiny. A gentle tap on the door shattered the bride's reverie, summoning her back to the present. "Are you ready?" a warm, excited voice asked. She mustered a smile and nodded, though her heart secretly wrestled with doubts. As she stepped out of the room, arm in arm with her father, the weight of every step echoed through her being. The aisle stretched before her, lined with familiar faces aglow with happiness. The groom's eyes shone with love, awaiting her approach. But just as she took her first step, the hall's doors burst open, sending shockwaves through the crowd. A figure stood at the entrance, breathless, with eyes that burned with unspoken words. Time froze. The groom's expression shifted from adoration to something inscrutable, his hands clenched at his sides. Murmurs swept through the space as the unexpected guest stepped forward. "I'm sorry," the voice trembled, yet remained resolute. "I had to come." A chill coursed through her veins as memories she'd long suppressed came flooding back. The walls she'd built around her heart began to crack. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, yet laden with emotion. The reply came, laced with urgency. "I had to see you, before it was too late." The silence that followed was oppressive, with every guest holding their breath, watching the scene unfold. The groom's gaze bore into her soul, as if seeking answers to unspoken questions. She stood at the precipice, suspended between two realms. The life she had meticulously crafted and the past that lingered, refusing to relinquish its hold. For the first time, she felt the ground beneath her tremble, as the foundations of her identity began to shift. The room was a tableau of frozen time, the air thick with anticipation. The weight of the moment pressed down upon every soul present, as if the very fabric of reality held its breath. The only sound she could discern was the insistent drumbeat of her own heart. At the altar, the groom stood rigid, his jawline taut, his hands clenched and unclenched in a rhythmic dance of restraint. His eyes, once aglow with love and promise, now seemed to bore into her very essence, as if searching for the truth she herself struggled to discern. The silence between them was a palpable force, a living, breathing entity that pulsed with unspoken questions and unresolved emotions. As she stood there, paralyzed by the sudden turn of events, she could sense the turmoil raging within the groom. His eyes, once bright with love, now seemed to cloud with a mix of confusion and hurt. But it was the other man, the one who had just burst into the room, who held her gaze captive. His chest heaved with ragged breaths, his eyes burning with an unspoken plea. There was no hint of anger, no shade of arrogance, just a raw, unbridled emotion that seemed to shake him to his core. "I know I shouldn't have come," he continued, his voice cracking with a vulnerability that was both haunting and heartbreaking. "I know I lost you, I know I have no right to be here." His fists clenched, as if grasping for the last threads of control, but his eyes never wavered from hers. "But if I let this day pass without telling you the truth," he paused, his voice heavy with emotion, "I'll regret it for the rest of my life." The room seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation, as he took a step closer, his eyes burning with a fire that seemed to melt the very space between them. As the uninvited guest's words hung in the air, she felt the ground beneath her tremble. Her legs weakened, as if the very foundations of her being were being reshaped. This wasn't the script she had written for her life. This day was meant to be a celebration of new beginnings, a fresh start. But now, standing at the crossroads, she was forced to confront the ghosts of her past. The groom, once a beacon of stability and promise, now seemed to represent a future she wasn't entirely certain she wanted. The other man, the one who had shattered her heart, yet still held a piece of it, stood before her, his eyes burning with a quiet intensity. The groom's voice cut through the tension, steady but laced with a subtle fury. "You're interrupting my wedding," he said, his eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't be here." The room held its collective breath, the air thick with anticipation. The uninvited guest hesitated, then exhaled sharply. "I know," he said, his gaze flicking between them, his expression a map of pain and longing. "But I had to ask her something." The groom's eyes flashed with anger, but the other man's gaze remained fixed on her. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The words struck her with the force of a hurricane, leaving her breathless and reeling. It wasn't just a question, it was a challenge, a plea, a doorway to a past she thought she'd left behind. The weight of those three simple words settled heavily in her chest, cracking open a door she'd thought was long sealed. She had spent so long convincing herself that this wedding was the right path, that the past was just a lesson learned. But now, standing at the precipice, she wasn't so sure. As the air vibrated with tension, the ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble. The groom's hand curled into a fist, his voice low and even, yet laced with a hint of steel. "She doesn't owe you an answer," he said, his words slicing through the silence like a gentle breeze on a summer's day. But the uninvited guest remained unmoved, his eyes burning with an inner fire as he held her gaze. His voice, now softer, took on a gentle, persuasive quality. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his words dripping with sincerity. "But if there's even the smallest spark of doubt in your heart, don't ignore it. Don't let the whispers of what could have been fade away into the silence." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd, like the gentle lapping of waves on a moonlit beach. Some guests looked away, their faces flushed with discomfort, while others watched with rapt fascination, their eyes glued to the unfolding drama. The air was alive with anticipation, the very atmosphere vibrating with the promise of secrets revealed and hearts laid bare. As the drama unfolded, her hands trembled like leaves in an autumn breeze. She yearned to speak, to shatter the suffocating silence, but her throat felt parched and unyielding. The groom stepped closer, his presence as a steady anchor in the tempest. "This is our day," he whispered, his voice laced with quiet desperation. "We've planned for this, and dreamed of this. Don't let him ruin it." Her chest constricted, as if the weight of her doubts had finally become too much to bear. That was the problem, she had planned for this, and dreamed of this. She had convinced herself that this was where she belonged. But now, as she gazed into the eyes of the one who had once held her heart, she wasn't so sure. Had she truly let him go, or had she merely buried him beneath the rubble of her own denial? The groom's hand reached for hers, his fingers brushing against hers like a gentle summer breeze. "Tell him to leave," he whispered, his voice tinged with a quiet pleading. "Tell him he's too late." The other man's eyes locked onto hers, his gaze burning with a fire that seemed to melt the very air between them. Her decision hung in the balance, suspended like a delicate leaf on the cusp of autumn. Her lips parted, and she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know." The words felt like a betrayal, a rejection of the life she had so carefully constructed. The room seemed to shudder, as if the very foundations of reality had been shaken. The groom's fingers, which had been reaching for hers, froze in mid-air, before slowly curling into a fist. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before, a glimmer of doubt, a spark of fear. The man from her past let out a shaky breath, as if her words had given him both hope and pain. "You don't know," he repeated, his voice hoarse with emotion. The silence that followed was oppressive, a heavy blanket that suffocated the air from her lungs. She yearned to explain, to justify the storm raging inside her. But what could she say? That she had spent years convincing herself that this day would be perfect, only to have everything unravel in an instant? That she had thought she had moved on, but seeing him again had ripped open old wounds she thought had healed? As she stood there, torn between two worlds, she felt the weight of both men's gazes pressing down upon her. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in like a vice. The whispers of the guests blended into a dull hum, a cacophony of confusion and concern. The groom's breathing was shallow, his knuckles white from clenching his fists too tightly. She could see the pain in his eyes, the disbelief, the quiet rage simmering beneath the surface. This was supposed to be their moment, the day they had been planning for months. And now, here they were, standing on the edge of something